Okay, Year 11. So I've decided to do another poem today, and we're going to look at this poem, Nettles. Okay, in terms of context for Nettles, there's not actually that much that I can tell you, apart from Vernon Scannell did fight in a war, so there's a lot of military imagery in here, so that may be a little bit relevant um, because of that. Um, Again, it's a poem that you can say you can assume is autobiographical, and it's his actual son because it seems that way. It seems like a recollection of a real event. But if you want to, you can just say the persona. If you say the poet feels that his son, etc., etc., then you need to put at the beginning of your answer, I am assuming the poem is autobiographical, and then it's okay if you say the poet talks about his son. Otherwise, throughout you'll say the persona's son. Okay, so let's look at structure first of all. So, the structure of Nettles. That says structure in case you couldn't work that one out. Right, let's move over here a little bit. So, do we have a regular rhyme scheme? Bed, spears, shed, tears. Seems pretty A, B, A, B to me. Saw, skin, raw, grin. Blade, it, parade, lit. Dead, rain, shed again. Yes, there is a regular A, B rhyme structure. Okay, and it's all one long stanza. At the beginning, you would be forgiven for thinking that this would be a sonnet, okay? But it isn't. It's 16 lines. It's really four quatrains all joined together in that ABAB rhyme scheme. So you can't call it a sonnet as such. You definitely can't call it a sonnet. It's not 14 lines, but it is a regular rhyme structure and one stanza. You can see that the lines are fairly regular. What we could look at is at a kind of visual representation of the line length. Sometimes examiners like it when you do this, as if to say the different lines here may look like if you turned it on its side and saw them just a row of nettles, all lying, some longer, some shorter than the others. Now, you may find that's a bit far-fetched, but it's to do with the form of the poem and it's a valid thing for you to talk about. Okay. Is it iambic? Is it pentameter? Let's see. My son, age 3, fell in the nettle bed. So far, that is iambic pentameter, 10 syllables with iambs, da-dum, 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 da-dum. Bed seemed a curious name for those green spears, that regiment despite behind the shed. I'm going to say so far it's pretty iambic. If you can find, and I'm not going to do everything for you, if you can find one of those lines that doesn't really fit with the iambic structure, then you need to think, why has the poet done that? Why has he broken that regular stress pattern? Is that line particularly significant, etc., etc.? But we can talk about it being the heartbeat rhythm and therefore being linked to love, especially heartbeat love between a son, a parent, and a child. Okay, so moving on to language and linguistic and literary features. Here we go. So there's a lot of military imagery in this. I'm going to just actually highlight all the military images. So here you've got spears here, regiment here. I mean, arguably the word pain, but that's not specifically military. Blade. I mean, perhaps the word slashed tends to be used in kind of wartime. Parade. Funeral pyre I'm going to light as well. Recruits and wounds. So really you could almost say that there's an extended metaphor of warfare throughout. You could certainly say that there's a semantic field of warfare using those words that I've already just identified there. Funeral pyre is because Vikings and other kind of fierce or kind of warriors, proud warriors, tended to light a funeral pile, which is like a big bonfire, and set light to the body. The Vikings used to then push it out onto the lake, ocean, water, whatever. And that's a kind of a Viking burial. So that's very much associated with military and pride and glory and that kind of thing. Okay. My son, aged 3, fell in the nettle bed. That is quite a declarative statement there, just a statement of fact. But it does immediately evoke our sympathy because of the age of the son, I guess, and it makes this poem, I guess, anecdotal. He's telling a little story, and a memory, very much like it's looking back on something like, say, Neutral Tones is as well. Bed seemed a curious name for those green spears. We've already talked about how that is, but there's kind of an ambiguous image there with spears because of the shape of the nettles, but also because of the sharpness. So you get both of those there. That regiment of spite behind the shed. Again, there's a personification there. That it's the fact that the abstract noun spite has been turned into a whole regiment. That's how spiteful they seem to be. Gives the nettles a quality of as if they're doing this deliberately. It was no place for rest. Okay, Caesura here. So he's going on the irony that the word bed has been used when it was certainly no place for rest because nettles are very, very painful. With sobs and tears, and I guess you've got emotive language here. With sobs and tears, the boy came seeking comfort, and I saw white blisters beaded on his tender skin. There's quite a lot of sibilance in these lines, giving a sinister tone, but also giving almost onomatopoeic, oh no, onomatopoeic or something, sense of crying. Though those, maybe you cry like that, I don't know. You could say that anyway, you'd get away with it, definitely. The boy, again, that's a bit weird. He's my son, and then the boy. There's a bit of a separation from him there. Maybe that's because it's too painful, the memory to think about, but you could make something of that, I'm sure, have some interpretation. White blisters beaded on his tender skin, the alliteration here, bringing awareness and emphasis to the painful look of the blisters. We all know what that looks like when you've got tiny little blisters on your skin when you've been stung by nettles. Again, the sibilance continues. We soothed him till his pain was not so raw. Again, there's a we here. We're assuming that it means there's more than one of him and the parents. So this is a very kind of family image. At last, he offered us a watery grin as a metaphor here, but it implies that he was crying, but he was smiling through his tears. So you could talk about the differing emotions there. And then I took my bill hook. Now, a bill hook is just a garden implement, almost like a scythe, but honed the blade, sharpened, honed meaning sharpened, and went outside and slashed in fury with it. You've got very active, powerful verbs here. Slashed in fury, showing the emotions of the father being so angry with the nettles that they dare to harm his son. Till not a nettle in that fierce parade stood upright anymore. It had been fierce, but he has cut them all down. And then in his triumph, we get a caesura there as well, like as in, I have killed them all, the end. And then I lit a funeral pyre to burn the fallen dead. It's almost like here he respects them. You only light a funeral pyre, like I said, if you have respect for the dead. So it's almost like he respects the nettles here, which you could talk about as well. There's a grudging respect for those things that have caused his son actual such pain. And then here's the bit again that tells us these last 3 lines really that the whole thing's been futile, because in 2 weeks the busy sun and rain again personifies those, had called up tall recruits behind the shed. It's as if the whole of nature are against his son here. The sun and rain have called up those tall recruits, being new nettles basically are growing. And then you get that end stop line here, really is a colon, not a comma or a full stop, a colon, to draw real attention to that last line. And that last line is basically the point of the whole poem. It could be metaphorical, this, but it could be literal. Statement of fact. My son would often feel sharp wounds again. Now, he might be writing this saying it's inevitable that he will often feel sharp wounds again, or he might be writing it looking back at the past and saying his son has had a lot of hardship in his life. Again, that's an interpretation. But it's the coming to terms with the fact that you can't ever look after your children completely. You have to let them feel some pain. You can't take everything away from them, which you must of course want to do as a parent. It must be a terrifying prospect when that comes along. Think you can't save your kids from any pain. And also, should you save them from every bit of pain? Surely we all have to feel something, we all have to learn lessons from life. So, tones of voice and emotions in this poem are anger, definitely. That was all going so well. I'll just talk if I can't write. So, tones will be anger. Also, you've got frustration, the futility of the whole thing, that it's what's the point? Sadness. You've got the despair of the boy, but also the despair of the father as well. But you've got pure, true love because it's unconditional love between a father and son, never-ending love, and regretful that he can't actually save his son from feeling those wounds. So yeah, Nettles is a lovely little poem, a nice one to have in your arsenal. See how I've done the military metaphor there as well? Because it's very good to compare with a lot of different poems, and also it's in that genre of the family poems in relationships, just in case you get a question specifically about those.